Welcome to another episode of Sunday School Dropouts podcast. And today I am so excited about our guest today, Melissa Duge Spiers. We've been friends and acquaintances on Instagram, honestly, for it's been a few years, honestly.
Since the pandemic, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's actually when I created my own little corner of Instagram was back, gosh, it's
Yeah.
been so many years now. But yeah, it's been a while. And so it's so great to have you on. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm giggling because, of course, we're two ex-Seventh-day Adventists on a Sunday school dropout podcast, but we're...
Yep. So for those of you who don't get that inside joke, yeah, it should be Sabbath school dropouts. Yeah, that was funny when we first were doing this podcast and we're talking about it being Sunday school dropouts. I'm like, that's great. It just the good little Adventist kid in me is like, but actually it's Sabbath school.
But actually.
But actually, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. So on that note, it's always great to talk to someone else who understands kind of the cultural background of Adventism. It's such a unique denomination to come out of. And so, yeah, I mean, and that said, I know everyone's experience in the denomination is unique. There's a lot of variety of experiences. So I would love to hear some of your background of just kind of, what that was like.
Yeah, it is interesting being now kind of in this ex-Adventist bubble that we've all created here on social media and meeting people whose experiences were so different. And obviously, I left when I was about 18. And when you're a kid, you just assume everybody's experience is identical to yours, right? So I just kind of left the church thinking everybody's experience had always been identical to mine. And oh my God, no, it hasn't. There's some liberal pockets that I never knew about, but also some really strange. I didn't know about the self-supporting schools and all that kind of stuff. But so my background is I'm fourth generation, I believe, on both sides. My great grandmother on my father's side was the classic Adventist missionary BOGO thing where she was this struggling single mother with a bunch of children. And so they were like, ooh, snag her for the Adventist church and we get all the kids. And then that's what happened. They put all of her kids through Adventist school and then through the Loma Linda Medical School. And so then the family has been Adventist ever since. And so grateful to the church for the opportunity. And sort of the same thing happened on my mom's side. And then my dad went to both Loma Linda Medical School and to the Andrews Seminary. So he was kind of preacher and doctor thing in the church and did a lot of missionary work and all of that stuff. I went to Andrews Academy and then I fled. Like the minute I graduated from academy, you know how it goes. Like there was only one path in Adventist Academy to go feed straight into the Adventist colleges. Like they did not talk to us about any other option. And they literally, at least during that time in the mid 80s, it was the ACT versus the SAT.
Yes.
And the Adventist schools would only administer. And so, of course, we weren't doing them online and all that stuff like everybody gets to do. You had your proctor and you had your set time and whatever. And all the public schools did the SAT and they did them on Saturdays. And so Adventists did the ACT and they did them on a Sunday. And so basically, and Adventist colleges took the ACT only. And no real colleges took an ACT pretty much. So we were screwed. And so I was determined to go to a real college. And so my parents and I kind of had a tiff about that. And I ended up going to the Adventist school in Braunau, Austria. I went to Bogenhofen for a year between academy and college. And that was kind of how I got one foot out the door. So that's where I learned to drink and smoke. And I ended up getting kicked out of there.
Oh, that was my next question. Like, how did that go?
Not well. We weren't very subtle. We were learning. Yeah, we would climb out we actually would steal, Bogenhofen is in this tiny town in Austria, and it's like literally in the middle of a farm belt, and it's the only place around. And so we would steal the ladder from the farmer next door, and we would hide it in the attic, and then we would shove it out our second floor dorm room window and go out dancing all night long. So we got caught, and so we got shipped back home. And then I got to go to a real college.
Oh, wow. Well, hey, it worked out then.
But so that was my exit out of Adventism. And back then there was no deconstruction. I mean, as very there was no I didn't know any other ex-Adventists at all,
Yeah.
and I was embarrassed. I was mortified at this weirdo upbringing that I'd had, and so I was at Barnard, Columbia, and I just wanted to hide it. Like I didn't want anybody to know where I came from, and I just kind of thought, well, I escaped. I'm done. That's cool. I left. Now let me just go on with my jolly life, and that worked not very well. You really have to deconstruct, and I didn't have the skills or the knowledge or the or support system or anything to do that. And
Sure.
really until I kind of found the deconstruction community on Instagram back when I sort of met you and was starting to realize that I'd been repeating super bad patterns in my life and trying to figure out why. And it was just a big aha moment of like, okay, I left the religion but not the mindset.
Mm.
And this needs a lot of work. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, there's so much. And it's so interesting. One of the things you even said that is it's such an Adventist thing. It's like we always define how long we've been in the church by what generation we are. And I
That's
mean,
that.
likewise, I think I'm fourth generation on both sides. It gets a little fuzzy
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
the great grandparents for me, but
Right.
so I don't know if they were born, I don't know if they were raised in it or if they converted themselves, but they were all
Yeah.
Adventist, I think. And so, yeah, I can relate that
Yeah. Right.
the family's been in it.
And I always, I mean, you get a lot of on social media, a lot of people battling with you and stuff too. And can you almost tell sometimes with your commenters, like I can tell who's a multi-generational commenter and where their mindset is, and then the converts, the like fresh rabid converts, and you can just tell by the way they comment. You're like, oh, I know when you joined the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can definitely tell that. I can tell. I mean, it's a lot of things. A lot of things.
Yeah.
I can't even think of any other anecdotes right now, but there's definitely not only like when they joined, but then also just what pocket it was that they joined.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, are you a Southern Adventist University Collegedale Adventist? Are you a Loma Linda
Or
Adventist?
are
Like
you a
one of
Loma
the
Linda Adventist?
Are you one of the liberal West Coast Adventists? Are you from
Exactly.
Andrews or Newbold and that whole community over
Oh
in
yeah.
England?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Newbold.
lot.
Oh my
It's a
God.
lot.
Yeah.
So when you did leave, I'm curious. So certainly that was out of academy, right? That you
Yeah.
said that was like
Yeah.
pretty much right out of academy.
Yep.
What was going on then that prompted you to leave? Was this like kind of a teenage rebellion situation, or was it like a theological, or all of
You
the
know,
above?
it's definitely was a teenage rebellion type of thing. Like I try so hard, and I have an older sister, and she left the church roughly ish around the same time, like high school, college age, and we discuss this all the time. Like, did we ever actually believe like the theology part or the religion part? Or were we just in it and following along because we were goody two shoes? And like, if you ask me to tell you the 28 or 29 beliefs or whatever, I don't know that I ever knew them.
Yeah.
And I really never cared about them. To me, it was basic teenage rebellion, and it was just hypocrisy. Like kids, I think you just smell hypocrisy, you feel it. And I just never could quite justify what I was learning with just nothing made sense really in all the rules and all the everything. And I think in particularly when you're a teenager, if you're questioning stuff, I just zeroed in on the parts where I could smell the most fear on the adults. And to me, that was sex and
Mm,
pop
okay.
culture. And I was like, those are the two things that they are the most terrified we're going to find out about. So let me dive in and see what I can find out. And so that's what I did. And if it hadn't been such a high control environment, I probably would have just sailed along with everybody else, right? But just like that super high control stuff, I just couldn't justify. It didn't make sense to me, and I was just like, why do we need to control all this stuff? You know, the vegetarianism and sex and it just everything just seemed so
Yeah.
silly, and I just couldn't buy into it.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh. That's really, I mean, credit to you. I mean, for recognizing just the hypocrisy of it, and then responding to that immediately as soon as you could. Like I wish I had done that as quickly as you had, but I didn't. It's like I recognized it, but it's like I guess I was one of those people who I had to sit and think about it for a decade before I acted on it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I
so
know that you had a lot more theological training and beliefs also, too, right? I mean, you really did believe all the church doctrines and everything, or not really.
oh, well, now that we're on the topic,
Yes.
yeah, no, I definitely was all about it. I mean, I was in it. So academy, like I had some bad experiences with specific teachers, chaplains and Bible teachers specifically. If they're listening to this, they know who they are.
And shame on you.
Yeah, exactly. Shame on all of you. And so I definitely had issues with them personally, but theologically, it's like I kind of just actually started. I went to a state university. I was a history major. Interestingly enough, that had me deep dive stuff with like the Great Controversy and starting to like really dive into like the history of like the Protestant Reformation, the Second Great Awakening that led to the creation of Adventism, all the things. And truly, it was the deep diving and taking it more seriously than pretty much anybody in my generation that is eventually what then caused me to leave. And that was about 11 years ago. 11 years. It was 2014. April of 2014. I could still tell you when it was. But yeah, it's interesting how that all played out. I didn't go to Southern like all my friends did because that tells you a bit where I'm from. I grew up in the Bible Belt, Tennessee, North Carolina, which means unless you are going to do a medical program and go to Loma Linda, most everybody goes to Southern Adventist University down there near Chattanooga, for those who don't know. But Collegedale is the town.
Go by the Little Debbie factory.
Yep, right across the street from Southern. Yeah, you know, which by the way is Adventist owned. Everybody,
Yes, indeed. That's right.
it's crazy.
The old
But
McKee family.
yeah, yeah. In fact, I think my parents went to academy with some of them, Collegedale Academy. I don't know which ones because I don't know, but I could ask them sometime. But
There was a girl who was, I don't know, probably 6 years ahead of me in school at Andrews who went down there to go to college, and she came back with a McKee husband, and she was like a celebrity. She had
wow,
scored Adventist royalty.
that is. Yeah, I mean those are the Adventist big guns, which is crazy because if you're not an Adventist and you don't realize, because I've had other friends and I'm like the Little Debbie that company, they're Adventist and they're like, "Are you serious?" Like, well, let me tell you about this story. So, yeah,
And
wow,
well, you know what I have heard? Maybe this may or may not make the cut here, but I've had multiple people in my DMs telling me that Little Debbie, because of course it's named after the daughter of whoever the founders were, she has a wife.
oh, okay,
Yeah. And
so
she is living her best life, not in an Adventist fashion, which I just
okay.
think is fabulous. I'm
That
so happy
I
for
was gonna say
her.
that. Yeah, no, good for her.
I
Wow.
know. I was just like, oh, this is wonderful. I hope she is just having just the best life.
Yeah. So on that note, yeah, no, Seventh-day Adventism is not an affirming denomination, or safe to be out.
And becoming worse and worse that way.
It seems, yes, yeah. There are individual little pockets, like there might be a church here and a church there. Usually that maybe is kind of as affirming as they can be without
Right.
being seriously reprimanded by the general conference. I've known a few, but yeah, as a denomination, I mean, from the top down, and it's a very hierarchical, very well structured institution. Seventh-day Adventism is.
Yeah. Kidding. And
Yeah,
very
it's not.
nepotistic at this point. I mean, Ted Wilson, and before that, his father was in charge of everything. I mean, it's just, ugh. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there was that church in Colorado just recently that got threatened to be shunned or disfellowshipped or whatever because they wouldn't come down hard on their LGBTQ population or something. I can't remember what the story was, but it was shocking. And I was like, are you serious?
Yeah, I heard whispers of that, but it's interesting. I'm still adjacent to the community, but I'm not in it like I once was. So I hear whispers of things, but unless I go and deep dive it and try to look into it myself, it's like I just don't stay up on things like I used to.
Yeah.
So I realized you were ready to get the hell out early. At least compared to like me, I took me well into my maybe mid to late 20s before I was more serious about it. But what were some of the most difficult parts about either? Well, yeah, what were the most difficult parts of leaving?
Leaving, I was really fortunate in that I did not, my parents didn't just cut me off, shun me, whatever. I was terrified of that. That was one of the most scary parts in the beginning couple of years because I just didn't know if I was going to have family or parents or anything. And they chose to just we kind of have a don't ask, don't tell family. We don't communicate very well. So it's become a big unspoken thing. And none of my siblings are Adventist and my parents are rabidly Adventist. And we just all go on as if
Okay.
nothing has happened. But so that was the biggest fear. And then silly fears, of course, being 18 and just knowing that I didn't fit in. I didn't know who Charlie's Angels were. I didn't know, I'd never seen Sesame Street. I had no clue about movies or TV or rock music or anything. And I mean, I can remember a bong being passed around in somebody's dorm room when I first got to college. And I mean, I would have smoked pot with everybody, but I didn't know how to use a bong. I was just like, "Ooh, that looks complicated." And so I was just like, "No, I'm good." Like
Yeah.
I didn't want to make a fool of myself. And so there was a lot of that where you were trying to play catch up and act like you sort of knew what was going on, even though you didn't. I kind of just decided, okay, there are some things I'm going to devote some time to figuring out. Like I like to listen to music, so I caught up on music. I caught up on movies, never really on TV, but stuff like playing cards, I can live my entire life without ever learning how to play cards fine. And
Yeah.
so you do kind of have to like structure, like, what am I going to make myself normal at, and what am I just going to be like, fine, I don't need normalcy there, because you just can't catch up on everything.
Yeah.
And then again, I was lucky that most of my family didn't choose to hate on me or even really try to reconvert me. And I would get Ellen White books mailed to me by my grandparents every
That was my next
Christmas.
question. I'm like, oh, so did you not get Ellen White books mailed to you? But, oh, you did.
Steps to
Okay.
Christ every
Oh,
Christmas.
it's a classic.
But other than that, it was never ugly. And that I think I'm really fortunate on because I've heard so many awful stories.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So it was mostly just the catch up.
Absolutely.
And still, I mean, you still feel weird. I don't ever feel like I am normal.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's a very unique and very insulated culture because it's interesting. And yeah, I'm curious how much of this experience like will resonate with you. Like I said, I grew up in the Bible Belt, so I mean, let's be honest, 99% of the folks down here are Protestant Christians of some
Right.
sort. But nonetheless, like growing up as an Adventist, even as like a 4 and a 5-year-old here in rural East Tennessee is where I grew up. I knew we were different, not only from how other folks maybe related to us, but also how we related to them. They were Sunday
Totally.
keepers.
Totally. And I don't know if you got, again, my sister and I talk about this all the time. We try to like pull it apart, like pull the threads apart, like what is family and what is church? Like where did
Yeah.
those things intersect? But I know at least for us, we got a healthy dose of superiority, and the Adventists do think they're totally superior and that the remnant church and we're the only true and we're and just, we talk all the time about how we learned pity, but we didn't learn empathy. And that came from the church, but it also came from our family. And yeah, so we knew we were weird, we were different, but we were also special. Oh, so special.
Oh my God, that unlocked a memory. What was that phrase that wasn't it Ellen White who the whole phrase of God's peculiar people, or was that somebody else who came up with that one?
Yes, and there's
Yeah.
that Instagram account that does the funny memes and stuff called A Peculiar
Yeah,
People, right?
yeah. Oh, I hate that word now because of that. Like, there's nothing wrong with the word peculiar, but like, I just, oh,
Oh my gosh, all the shared Adventist cringe moments. My God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I asked, what were the most like difficult parts? But the flip side, what were the most relieving parts of leaving?
Knowing that I was right. Like it was,
Mm.
I never questioned that I might be going astray, or like when I left, I thought maybe, oh my God, I'm gonna all of a sudden discover that this is wrong and it's evil, just like everybody's always said it was. And just really being able to sink into the fact that like this is life and all of that. Don't trust yourself and don't trust your emotions, and you're bad, you're evil, you're all of that stuff just was lifted. And it was like, oh my gosh, life is to be enjoyed. I am to enjoy my own talents or whatever desires or focus, or it was the most incredible lifting really of just grim and joylessness. There's just this joylessness that comes with all the Ellen White stuff. And all of a sudden life was full of joy and fun
Mhm.
and happiness. And God knows I made a lot of really bad decisions in all of that, but they were my decisions. And then meeting so many people that truly have been much better people than people I knew within the church. Like people
Mm.
who
Yeah.
are driven morally and ethically by something internal, not by having to externally. That was a huge revelation.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
And that came in pieces. Like my college roommates who are still my best friends, like they really kind of opened my eyes to that and critical thinking and things that I just had no clue about. But then it just still, like my second husband, my kid's dad, he was truly the first person that I had spent so much time with, like family members, because he was my husband, who I really was just like, this person operates from a good and bad that comes from themselves, from like, it was really eye-opening. And I was whatever 30, that people could be entirely driven by an internal ethical system that made them call some tough calls, where I'd seen a lot of Adventist fudge because it was
Ah,
they could. Or so that I think was just that was incredible.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And then I just, yeah, that realizing that that internal locus of control rather than external locus of control, that was, I know for me too, was such a huge shift. But it
Yeah.
was not it was not easy. It was long. It was slow going, I can tell you that. What would you say are some of the most unique things that folks coming out of Adventism, trying to deconstruct, get away from whatever, what are
Yeah.
some of the most unique things those folks deal with?
I do think that because Adventism is so high control of just the entire person and culture and everything, I do think that one of the first things I would tell people trying to come out of it is to do a kind of a triage of where they kind of like I knew I didn't need to deal too much with deconstructing the theology because it just wasn't it hadn't affected me very much, and it wasn't
Mm.
buried in my psyche. For some people, that's huge, and for other people, it's the vegetarianism or the whatever they are most married to the control of the church. That's obviously going to be what's the hardest to deconstruct from. So they really need to start kind of ranking those because you're just
Yeah.
not going to hit them all. And it would be a
Yeah.
shame to spend all your time reading the Bible if what you're really screwed up about is purity culture or vice versa.
Hmm.
And so I think that's one of the hardest things. And then clearly, like social support. I know a lot of people. I think I was really lucky because I left so early. So then I just went on and and you did too. You went to like public college, right? So then you had friends
Hmm.
there, and you just kind of you had external social support immediately. But a lot of people, particularly people I think who married early in the church, and their social support was that church spouse, and then they're trying to leave much
Yeah.
later, and all their friends are in the church and their family. So I think I would urge caution in leaving too early before you have some sort of support system set up. that doesn't just include Adventists.
Yeah.
Because that's key.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an important piece because, well, speaking both myself and then just anecdotally from folks I've spoken with, like on Instagram, for example,
Yeah.
other folks that either have been out for years or are trying to figure out how to get out and how to separate. And I feel like social isolation is one of the biggest common denominators, especially with Adventism. I think it's true of a lot of folks who deconstruct. I mean, just because and naturally it's an isolating experience in a lot of ways, but Adventism is just, I don't know. It's a whole other beast, no
Yeah.
pun intended, because we love our beasts over there. But
Mark thereof.
it's so insulated. It's so insulated.
Yeah.
It's a thing where it's a two-edged sword, I think, in that on one level, if you're still in it and you stay in the culture, it is cool how you know somebody everywhere. Like I was even telling another former evangelical friend,
Yeah.
they deconstructed their background, but again, they had no background in Adventism. And it's like, I don't off the top of my head know anybody in Loma Linda or like Newbold communities, but I can guarantee you I could drop into either one and I very quickly would find common points of connection, mutual connections. They probably know a family member of mine. And that is just Adventism. That's a very common experience, especially if
Yeah.
you grew up in it.
Yeah.
But then that two-edged sword is, how do you leave? Like that's my support. I know that culture like the back of my hand and I don't really know anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Are you on the ex-Adventist Reddit?
I think I have. I not actively, no. I
Not
think I've seen
actively,
it a
but-
couple times. I know it
Because
exists.
I often see, I mean, so many posts, again, from younger kids in their 20s or whatever. And that's their biggest concern is that social isolation. How am I going to make friends? I feel like I don't have the skills to. A lot of them are from the self-supporting schools and stuff, which is its whole other, and homeschooling and that kind of stuff. And that's their biggest concern. And it's valid. It's really, it's huge. And it's just that insulated culture that just,
Yeah, it's interesting. You brought up the self-supporting schools a couple times, and I never went to one, but I say that. I mean, I guess Fletcher Academy almost is because it's technically not owned by the denomination, but it's not as extreme and fringe as some of them. Because there's another one in East Tennessee called Laurelbrook, which is a self-supporting.
yeah.
And yeah, so for those who don't know about Adventism, I would say the self-supporting schools is to Adventism kind of what the homeschool culture is to evangelicalism. It's like just
Yeah.
that one step further. There's a lot more fundamentalism
Yeah.
happening there, a lot more extremism, quite frankly, I would say.
Yeah. I think so, for sure.
I don't know. Does that seem fair?
It does seem fair. And, I just recently learned about the whole ASI, how it was the external Adventist arm of funding and stuff, and how, like, the Adventist church itself knows that these schools are fringe and extreme because it won't actually say it owns them or funds them. It funnels the money to those schools through the back door. And so, yeah, I mean, oh, it just makes me so angry.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. And yeah, it's another I was going to say on that note, one thing that is really interesting about Adventism too is how good they are at proselytizing and mission work.
Yeah.
I mean, case in point is I was last summer, I was actually in Tonga down near Fiji, and
Yeah.
the first damn church I see on the island is a Seventh-day Adventist church. I mean, and then there were Mormons too, because of course there were.
Because of course there were.
I think Jehovah's Witnesses, again, because of course there were. I don't know. It's these American-born end times denominations. I guess all of us are good at this.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's not abnormal. Like Adventism, I think is existing. Like missionaries are in just about every country in the world, I think,
Yeah.
and they pride themselves on it.
They do. They really pride themselves on it, and I find it so revolting, and I find it so unethical. Particularly Adventists, I think, more than anybody else. Although the Catholics do the education and health stuff too, like the Adventists do, but Adventists sweep into places because I know my dad used to do it. He was like the preacher and the doctor, so he could just go in there and be. And they sweep into these places that have no infrastructure and no medical care. And yeah, come to our free clinic and let us make you an Adventist. Well, fuck, I would too if I had a toothache and I couldn't. I mean, they're just taking advantage. They're just taking advantage. It's so unethical, and in my opinion. But
Oh, I agree. Or like the big city equivalent in the States, you'll have like a Revelation seminar where a meal is provided, but you have to sign up and register first and attend the seminar, and then you get the food.
Yep. Yep.
Like that is
Exactly.
such a common tactic.
That's just, it's really revolting. And then just recently, I've been hearing from all of the people who used to work those seminars and Revelation stuff that they're not supposed to say that they're Adventist, which just cracks me up, but also infuriates me because, again, the church knows they're being shitty. And so, oh, don't say you're Adventist. It'll scare people away. Oh, they'll think we're a cult. Oh, really? You think?
It's like, I wonder
I don't
what
know
would
why
make them
they
think that. Wow.
Oh my God. It's just so infuriating.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, and on that note, I mean, I remember such a pivotal moment in my childhood really, but I remember it vividly. And that was just David Koresh in Waco, Texas, and how much the church bent over backwards doing PR to separate themselves from the Branch Davidians, even though I also have come to know after watching like recent documentaries that have come out, like I've come to know how many families that were there or died there or knew people that died there, like how many were still actively involved in Adventist circles. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
SDAs who directly knew people and had family members that died in Waco.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know. Because I remember it happening, of course, and I was still Adventist, I believe, at that. No, it was 93 or whatever. So I was in college or something, but still, nobody was talking about it in Adventist churches as if there was any connection at all. And Koresh
Right.
went to PUC. They literally had to like kick him out because he was so Adventist, and then the Branch Davidians were Adventist also before they broke off. So like it was a double whammy, and he was still doing all the Ellen White stuff in Waco, and most of those families were Adventist. So that's one of my favorite topics when I'm just feeling spiteful. I make a video about how many connections there were between the Branch Davidians and the Adventists, and everybody gets all angry.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's a whole rabbit hole we could go down because like I started doing that too after there was like a movie or a documentary, like a big one. It wasn't
Yeah.
Netflix. I don't even
There
know. It
was
came out.
recently because there was like a 20-year anniversary or something like that. I
Yeah,
can't remember. Yeah.
that makes sense. So it would have been 2023. That makes
Yeah.
sense when it came
Yeah.
out. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, no, I'm right here with you on that one.
Yep. Yep. Oh, it just makes people just go, they lose their minds. They lose their shit. And it's like, well, argue with history.
Yeah, yeah. But it is interesting. And what you mentioned too about like them not being honest about being Adventist, like with the seminars, the Revelation seminars. I've noticed that too because often the literature that's in mass handed out to local communities before one of those events will give like the address of a church. It'll say it's about Revelation, God's end time plan for his people, like something vague like
Yeah.
that. It'll say food provided, register here, those sorts of things. But you notice it won't say the church denomination. It'll just say the address. But it's funny. I've told my not Adventist friends, I'll be like, if you ever see anything like that and it's promoting a Revelation seminar and they're not being transparent about a denominational affiliation, I can guarantee you it's Seventh-day Adventist because that is their tactic.
Totally. Totally. Well, and on reservations, I know they have a slightly different spin. They say they don't even use like revelation or biblical anything. It's spiritually based. We have a spiritual path, blah, blah, blah. They're trying to blend
Okay.
in with what they think they perceive is Native American spirituality, which I'm sure they haven't done any in-depth dives, but they're shitty. They're crafty and they lie. They lie.
I had a friend remark who had left the church as well, just saying like so many of the interactions you have with them, they're very like just disingenuous.
Yeah.
And a lot of the interactions are not in good faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's the icky thing. It's like I can agree or I can disagree with folks on a lot of things theologically and whatnot.
Right.
But when I feel like you're not even actually willing to be honest and furthermore, you're actively trying to manipulate,
Yeah.
that just feels gross.
It does. It does. And granted, I mean, probably the people who talk to me or comment to me or whatever are not a straight across I probably get a segment of people, but it is shocking to me when I feel someone is being authentic and honest, because so many of the interactions are not. And that's sad. It's a small portion of my interactions. Am I like, this is actually a really good, honest person
Yeah.
with good
Yeah.
intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking like who might be listening to this. And so
Yeah.
on one level, there's folks who didn't grow up in the church who were just like, oh, this is so intriguing because what the hell? But also for folks who have grown up in this, who maybe are trying to get out, maybe spent most of their life in it. I think it's always important to kind of offer this too. So I'm curious, what has been the most important thing for you, like in just healing from all of this?
I really do think it was figuring out that I did need to deconstruct. Like, I couldn't just sail on into life. I needed to take some time and really examine what residual stuff from the church had affected me. And unfortunately, that meant having to go back and refamiliarize myself with a lot of the, like I did have to go back and read that stupid freaking purity manual. Did you have to read the Harold Shryock on becoming a woman and on becoming a man?
Oh God, that sounds like something I would have read in like, because our senior Bible class, half of it was marriage and the family. So
Marriage and
probably,
family class.
I think I blocked some of that from my mind, but
Yes, right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Marriage and family, where we had the chart of how long you could be dating someone before you got married, because, oh my God. Yeah.
That was it was from that class though, when I
Yeah.
then more recently watched Shiny Happy People, and they were deep diving Bill Gothard. Like, oh yeah, we use the umbrella model among other things. There's so much connection between Adventism and
So
IBLP and all that.
much. When I saw Shiny Happy People, the part that struck me was the fact that Gothard was so obsessed with the girls having to have long, wavy hair, and that was us. I mean, we were forced, and I was like, how did that cross over? Like, but then I looked it up, and Adventists were actually sending huge busfuls of people to Gothard and IBLP seminars. They were the largest attendees at one point at Gothard seminars. So there you have it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, how did this happen? How did this crossover happen? So I had to research it, and yeah, tons of crossover. But sorry, I just went off on a
Oh
tangent.
no, that's an interesting connection. I think a lot of folks don't know about it.
Yeah, yeah. Just like people don't know that the JWs, like the person who started JWs was an Adventist pastor at one point, and like it's all that stuff is just nasty, all mixed together. But so I do think that having to acknowledge that I needed to deconstruct and that was a super painful process to be like, okay, I have to go back and look at some of this shit that I literally have blocked out. I didn't want to look at the purity culture stuff. I didn't want to look at the misogynistic, like, men over women stuff. And that had really affected my life terribly for 30 years after I left the church. And I just didn't know how much of that I was acting out. So that was an icky process, but necessary. You've got to do it, and you've got to really look at the church programming where it embedded itself in your body, and that's just horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear that. It's like, it's almost like leaving like a toxic, dysfunctional family of origin. And on one level, it's like, well, I got away from them. I'm good. And like, yeah, that's a start. Sure. But also it's like at some point, you're going to have to address a lot of those things that are just still living within your nervous system, living within your body, that are showing up in how you daily just live your life. And I think that's important. I know for me, like when I left, like I just kind of left. I didn't want to think about it anymore. And I kind of did this thing where interestingly, when I deconstructed, kind of just deconstructed Christianity. So by virtue of that, I kind of just bypassed really deep diving Adventism. I'm like, well, I threw the whole thing out from the foundation, but now, like kind of what you're saying in some ways, I'm like, okay, but there's some really unique Adventism pieces that I need to go back and actually sit with and recognize kind of how deeply that affected me. Because it wasn't just Christianity that affected me. It was like the health message and the hypervigilance around purity of food and vegetarianism and all the things like that, for example, or just the investigative judgment and I don't know, like just how, like, again, hypervigilant and creating almost like, at least for me, where it was almost like always had to be to asking for forgiveness. I'm talking about as a kid though, like making sure that
Yes.
there was no sin that had not been
Yep.
brought before God, beseeching God for forgiveness, because you never
Yeah.
knew
When he was
when
going to
those
come.
books were sealed. And if you were not
Yep.
in the book of life, I guess you were
Yeah.
just going to go to hell, or
Yeah.
not go to hell, but you would be destroyed at the
Right.
judgment.
Right.
Because we, of course,
Exactly.
don't believe in hell in the
The
eternal conscious
Adventist
torment
version,
sense.
because of
It's
course
like,
we're special. We had our own version of hell too.
yep. Oh my God.
But I think you just made a really good point, and I hadn't actually thought of it, but it's the perfect parallel, actually, of like being raised in an abusive family. I mean, Adventism is abusive. And so, like, yeah, you can escape and you can go start your own family with the best intentions and the most wonderful people, you can marry the most wonderful person or whatever. Most likely, you will repeat those abusive family patterns unless you've done a shit ton of work. And that's where I found myself, was like I was repeating all these weirdo Adventist patterns of submission and just self-abnegation and not trusting that I had a voice and just all these things that I didn't think had anything to do with religion.
Yeah.
And it had everything to do with religion.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot there. And yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I'm not saying like that therapy or coaching is the universal, that everyone should do it, but it's like, I know for me personally, like that was such a important piece of it, because it's like,
Totally.
there's just so much, there's only so much that you can do on your own without other social support. And again, I don't even necessarily mean therapy, but just other support, where it's like, it's such a hard, it's just such a hard process to get away from all of that programming, when that's like all you've known, when that's what you grew up in, when that's what your whole world was.
Yep. Oh yeah. I am a huge like proponent of therapy. And sometimes some of the most wonderful things therapists have said to me over the years, sometimes they're just like, "You're right. That was awful." And just sometimes that's what you need to hear from someone external. Like you have all these different therapy breakthroughs, and some of it's like really deep and sometimes just hearing someone say like, "Well, that was fucked up," is like, "Oh my God, I'm not crazy." It's, it's sometimes the simple things, but you can't do it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm interested to hear your take on this question. So, what would you speak to the person who's, say, they left yesterday, they're one day out? What's like the one piece of advice, support that you might offer to them?
That it is going to come in waves. Don't expect your recovery, escape, etc., to be a linear progression. You will have leaps and you will have fallbacks, and that's okay. And sometimes ignoring it and just going on as if nothing's happening is all you can do at the moment too, and that's all right too. I think people feel like once they've started the ball rolling, they have to keep pushing, and it's not sustainable. It's such an overwhelming, huge thing that you're doing, leaving, that expect hiccups, and just know that that's part of the process, and and it's hard to even tell somebody who's just leaving, like, you can trust yourself, because they've been told forever that they can't trust themselves. So but start to believe that maybe you can trust yourself, because it'll
Yeah.
be there.
Yeah.
You're going to be
Yeah.
there for yourself eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, and I really think, I just appreciate you being here and sharing your story, because also I think one of the biggest things that can be reassuring to folks is knowing that there are other people who have walked this path, and they're okay. Like,
Yeah.
they're actually doing well and
Yeah.
thriving
Yeah.
in spite of the Adventist upbringing, or, all of that.
Totally, totally. And that's a big part of why I speak out. And I mean, you know how it gets a little tiring when commenters are mean or whatever, and sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh. But it's important. I didn't have anybody that I could look to be like, oh my gosh, look how great it is to be out. And so if I can, and it's also one of the joys of being old, because I've been here for a long time now too. It's not like I'm fresh out and maybe it's not going to work. Like, I can tell people it works. It works. You can be done. absolutely done. And so it's a joy. Hopefully it's a gift I can give to people.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that so much. And I know that I think that's one of the pieces that I hear most frequently, just from folks who reach out to me, like not even in an official coaching capacity, but like social media. And it's just like,
Yeah.
does it get better? Like I just left, or even more frequently than that, I haven't left yet, but I know I want to. I don't know how. Like I don't know anybody who has left and hasn't just, I don't know, disappeared. Like I don't know anyone who's left and is
Yes.
thriving.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really true. I have a bunch of those DMs too. Like I'm half in, I'm out mentally, but I'm still in, like all that
Yeah.
stuff of people navigating, and that's really difficult. And yeah, so if we can just be the face of what it's like out here and
Yeah.
encourage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to make sure I get a chance to ask you this too. So I understand that you also are working on a book,
Yes.
and yeah, I would love to hear about that as well.
Okay.
Anything that you're able or willing to share.
Yeah, yeah. So I started writing a memoir. Okay, so this requires a little bit of backstory.
Oh no.
So when I was about 30, I found out, 30 something, I found out that someone in my family that I really had always admired and looked up to had been a serial child predator within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That was a huge shock. And even though I'd been out of the church for a long time, rocked my world, totally rocked my world. I hid from it for a while, but then when I started going through all my, like, I really need to deconstruct, I was like, okay, I really need to deal with this piece. And I actually tracked down and befriended one of the victims. And she and I formed a really, you would say, unlikely friendship. I adore her. She was so key in like pushing me to look at the Adventist. If it hadn't been for her, I probably would not have gone deconstruction path. She just kept kind of pointing me, like I thought I wanted to know her story and my family's story. And I realized that really wasn't what I needed. I needed church story and me story and she just kept nudging me, like she talked to me as much as I wanted about my family stuff, but she would keep pushing me like, look at this part of the Adventist church, look at that part of the Adventist church. And she was significantly older than I was, and so she'd even seen a different part of the Adventist church during the crazy 60s. And so that was bizarre and wild. And she was the one who pointed me back at that stupid purity culture manual, and she was like, I know you had to read it. And I was like, no, I didn't. And then she sent it to me and I was like, ah! And I was like, oh my God. And it all started flooding back. I was like, oh my God. And so I started writing about that when I started talking to her, and that went on for years. And then I dropped it. I had a family. I just wanted to live a life and not deal with trauma. And picked it up about 5 years ago again. And I went back to her. We started talking again. And I picked up my manuscript. And so I entered it in this contest just on a fluke during COVID of like unpublished manuscripts. And I won. And so I was like, oh, well, now I guess I got to do something.
Oh, that's awesome.
Actually do this. So I got an agent, and then I've been rewriting and all that stuff. And I've been pitching it around for the past year. And just this month, I'm in final talks with a couple of publishers. So I don't have any concrete details, but I have one of two ways that I'm going to go with it. And so I'll have details soon as to when it's going to be published and all of that. But it covers Adventist upbringing and deconstruction and healing and all kinds of just sleazy, awful, horrible things in the Adventist church.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah. So let me know when you do have any more concrete details. I will be happy to, well, not only share this news and
Yeah.
platform it as much as I can, but also I just want to read it. I will be pre-ordering.
I
will be the first pre-order.
I might be needing beta readers, and so I may be calling you up and being like, "Do you want to be a beta reader?"
Oh well, absolutely to that as well. So yes, yeah, it's just such a needed. I mean, that's such a needed thing because I mean, and not to make too many comparisons because I'm not trying to diminish anybody else's stories, but like one thing I've noticed is like there's a lot, at least in Instagram, folks who left the LDS church. Like
Yes.
a lot of visibility of former Mormons.
Yes.
Same is true of just your non-denominational evangelicals. A lot of folks who've done that are very, very visible. I really never, I don't know. I just haven't seen many Adventists, or at
That's
least
it.
that they're actually former Adventists. Like a lot of
Yeah.
folks I feel leave and just kind of want to don't really want to talk about that anymore. We're gone.
Yep.
But then a lot of folks who now are leaving and are looking for folks that have left successfully or
That's it.
can't find it. And so
Yeah.
all of that to say, like, just I appreciate, well, not only you being on this podcast, I appreciate you writing, the work that you do, the work you do on social media, on Instagram. Of course, that's how we know each other. So thank
We
you.
got to keep speaking out. We got to keep holding the church's feet to their fire. You know, like the Baptists have had their day of reckoning. The Catholics have had theirs. The LDS, I don't know, sort of, sometimes maybe, I'm not sure. But Adventists have
Fair.
managed to just do whatever they want and hide whatever they don't want seen. And enough. We
Yeah.
got to expose
It's-
everything.
I hope, I think their day's coming.
Yeah.
I hope it is. I just anecdotally just know enough stories of different survivors of things that
That's it.
were very directly covered up by the church,
By
the
the
institution of the church, that
By the church. Yep.
a lot of NDAs, a lot of non-disclosure agreements that were forced on people. That's
Yes.
all I can really say about that, I guess. But
Yes, right. Exactly. No, it's I mean, I'm staggered. I'm staggered by how many stories I hear. And I knew it was a problem just to judge from what happened within my family and how much that was covered up in various ways. But I mean, I have people probably every week, a new story or something, people saying it's, yeah, it needs to be exposed.
yeah, well, I'm here for it, and I will help facilitate as much of that as I can too. So, yeah, well, thank you so much for for joining us today. Just taking the
Yes.
time. I know it's been a long time coming, and I'm glad that we finally were able to get our schedules
Yes.
to align. It's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully by the time this comes out, maybe I will have some book news. So hopefully that might.
Absolutely. And if that's the case, we will absolutely put all of that info in the show notes and on all the relevant captions when we're sharing
Yeah.
this on Instagram later. So
Yay!
yeah,
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thank you
Okay.
so much. It's been great.
Awesome.